Well, welcome along to this discussion about how a leader might support a beginning teacher through an important transition. So I guess it's about change, but in this case, personal change. Now, I am going to introduce you to my lovely colleagues. Craig, do you want to just introduce yourself?
I'm Craig Murison. I'm Principal of Mackay Christian College, Mackay, North Queensland.
Thank you. Jeanine, hi.
Hi Jill, I'm Jeanine Gallagher. I'm a Senior Education Officer for Brisbane Catholic Education.
Thank you, welcome. And Tony, hi.
G'day folks, Tony McCormack, Lockyer District High School in Gatton. I'm Deputy Principal out here.
And I've invited them because I respect these guys as leaders. They've got great leadership experience and I would like their insights because I've been researching with some beginning teachers, and one of these highly performing, very capable young women went out to teach in a school, and it seemed to be the leader's lack of involvement in her story as a first-year teacher that led to her, by the end of the first year, making a decision to leave the school. Now, I am confident that the leader probably didn't know that they were part of this narration of identity and her telling herself a story that she could leave by. So I would like some authentic leader voices here. If I tell you two stories, can you tell me is there a role for a leader here, or was this a first-year teacher problem? So two of the incidents. First one, she is a primary school teacher. There had been a child in her school where there's been a family breakdown, and what she did, it's a small town, everybody knows where everybody lives. She came home one night to find one of the parents on her veranda at night, quite agitated and wanting to know where his family was. She felt a bit threatened, dealt with the parent, but went inside and tried to follow up with the school leader saying, what do I do? You know, I felt a little bit uncomfortable, but never heard back from the school leader. And she kind of went, oh well. And I think she then connected back into support networks that were, you know, a couple of 100 kilometres away and said, did I do okay? What should I do next? The other story is one where she had a really positive experience. She went away to some professional development, learned about a literacy program with one of her co-teaching partners, came back, implemented it, collected a lot of data like we've taught them at university, be an evidence-informed teacher, found her students' learning improved wonderfully. So she took this data story and success story to the school leader, wanting to say, you know, can I share this, wanting to see some, I guess, momentum build. The school leader said, well done, but that was the end of the conversation. And for this beginning teacher, she reflects how, well, maybe this school isn't that interested in professional learning anyway, and starts to think about, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can be involved in a culture that's about learning. So, Jeanine, you were telling me this kind of resonates with your experience as a beginning teacher. Would you like to kick us off? Reflect back to me, the leader, about the story.
And I think as an early career teacher, I had some similar experiences, not the same, but similar. And I guess I walked away from those experiences feeling vulnerable, dismissed, and having no voice, and completely disempowered and devalued. And from the reaction of my school principal, and I kind of put that away in my pocket and went, now I know what not to do, because I would never want to be in that situation again. And I've actually kept that with me all the way through my career and moving into leadership. And I now manage a team of early career people, and I'm really consciously aware of the need to for their voice, and to really sit and listen and be with them and really journey with them as they make that transition from young adult to a career, and from university into the career. And young women particularly, I think, and I mean I can only talk as a young woman myself, but young women in particularly, in roles where most of the people that we're dealing with are generally men in leadership. And so as a female in a leadership role, I see it's really very important that I maintain that. And I can early this year, a young lady that I have on my team had a particular issue not related to her work, but it was impacting on her work, and I was really valued the importance of sitting there and working through that in a really in a constructive but time efficient way, because it's not all about talking all day long about what's going on. But what I do with my early career people is I meet with them very regularly. And it's about building that emotional capacity for them and trust, where you can actually then share and move through those issues. So this young lady, she was probably after 4 years of study, university medals, did very, very well. 4 weeks into her career, was ready to walk away for a personal issue. I got an email from her this week and thanked me for being her mum at work. Not really what I wanted to hear, but said to me, you know, in terms of the leadership, and she's reflected on that experience, and I've kept her in her career, and that's invaluable. And I think it's that taking the time, being with them, and valuing and honouring their experience as being genuinely distressful. And I think in terms of the classroom practice, you know, we all make mistakes and we all do great stuff, and we learn best when we get feedback and are able to be encouraged. And being dismissed is the best way to diminish. And I think as a leader, it's required of us to make sure that doesn't happen in our practice. And I use required very strongly. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jeanine. And I know you've got to go, but thank you, and thank you for speaking so strongly about it, and for drawing in both personal experience as a teacher and as a leader. It's been lovely to listen to, and I understand you need to go so the security guards don't lock you into your office overnight. So if you need to pop off at any time, do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your hangout.
Thank you. Tony, can I hear from you next? Because you've been a principal out west, and I'm sure you've had a number of beginning teachers work with you. What are your thoughts as a leader about those stories?
Absolutely. I guess one of the most important things that I've always carried with me through my leadership journey has been a tweet that I saw somewhere that said, you've got to be careful how you train people or else you train them to leave. And particularly in small communities where people are often well and truly out of their comfort zone, they're particularly Generation Y, they're people who've lived with their parents their whole life, and this is the first time that they've ever moved more than around the corner from home, and you're asking them to go 800 kilometres west or north or northwest. People are uncomfortable and people need support. They need a friendly face. They need somebody to be able to reassure them and to just bounce ideas off. In your first story about the parent, I, as a leader, I think I saw Craig have a similar response when you were telling us the story before. It just sort of shake my head that kind of a thing could happen. Yes, you're not always available at the phone at the time that it rings, but to not follow up, to me, would be a bit of a crime. That you really need to show people that you care and actually mean it. And the best way to mean it is by following up and by knowing the individual and knowing the individual circumstances to be able to support them. It's a little bit off on a tangent, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to pick up on something that Jeanine said as well. I've been kicking around this idea that you really don't actually learn how to do something really well until you've experienced it done really poorly to you. And if you've gone through a situation where induction hasn't been done well or support hasn't been there and you've lived through it and come out the other side, it really makes you as a leader want to make sure that you do better. And I've had several experiences of people who haven't lived through the poor times, and I'm asking them to do things and they're looking at me as if it's a bit of a foreign concept because they don't know how important it is until it's not there. And I think that support's a really big component of that.
What I heard from you and from Jeanine is that it's a part of a leader's job is not just in schools to address the professional practice that's happening in the classroom, where you are actually helping a whole life identity, I guess, as an educator. You know, how this professional work fits into a sense of who I am as a person, and that support is going to spill over sometimes into like, you know, by supporting the person, you're actually supporting the professional person. Is that right?
Absolutely. That if people aren't happy at work and they're not happy in the context that they're teaching in, then they're certainly not going to be giving you 100% while they're in front of the class. Particularly in small communities, I think it's almost more important there than even in the bigger communities. You're a teacher 24/7, you are part of the community fabric, and community is so much a part of education, as education is so much a part of community. If you can support teachers in the whole of their professional and personal careers as part of a team, as part of the community, then that only has positive outcomes for your students, for your community, and for your team at school.
Okay, so you weren't just being, you know, soft-hearted and caring. You also had, you know, the school leader hat on. I like it. Craig, I'm going to flip over to you. What are your thoughts? I know you've probably mentored many beginning teachers.
Yeah, some of them well and some of them not so well, I think. Jill, there's a fair bit of information missing from the information you gave us. So while I just want to affirm I agree with everything Jeanine said and everything that Tony has said, I no dispute, I do want to perhaps come out on this particular school leader's side just a little bit. This is a small community, which probably means it's a small school, which probably means you've got a younger, less experienced school leader in the position, because in our industry that's often how the promotional track goes. It's sad and unfortunate that probably some of the more difficult jobs are in those smaller, more remote, community-centered, community-focused schools. And I don't know what type of school it was, but making some assumptions, if it was a systemic school of some description, those systemic setups, what I'm asking is, I'd need to sit down with the principal and say, where are the goalposts for you? What does success look like for you? Because that's how a school leader is going to often establish their priorities. And this is an issue of priorities. If you have an immutable principle, a value in your organisation that says people come first, what makes this school work are the people who are in this school, whether they're teachers, whether they're parents, whether they're students, and you then prioritise around that, then that school leader would possibly have made different decisions. I read a study some years ago about where they attached a heart monitor to a series of principals over a 3-month period in, a week at a time over a 3-month period in a small regional school, a large city school, and a sort of semi-regional school. And they measured the heart rate of the principals, and the principals tracked, they were followed, and they were tracked against their activities. The 3 schools were government schools. They weren't in Queensland, but in each case, this is back in the days of snail mail, the principal's heart rate, reflective of the stress, was at its highest when the mail came in. And when they interrogated the reason for that, it was because the mail contained the systemic instructions for a period of time. So there would be a flurry of activity needed around providing the feedback, providing the data back, implementing whatever it was the systemic instructions were. I count myself very fortunate not to work in that environment, and I think this principal has failed in a duty of care to a first-year teacher. So now I want to balance it a little bit the other way. But I think the issue is probably a much bigger issue than just dealing with this teacher. It's actually about organisational culture. If you build a culture of conversation, a culture of professional dialogue, a culture of safety for people to speak with you about matters, and you build that culture quickly with young teachers, then that teacher could easily have gone back to that principal and said, hey, you haven't followed up with me. I have a need. Can you follow up with me? But if that culture, power establishment is established in a different way and the person's unapproachable, that becomes very, very difficult. The leader's got to be a safe person to speak with. The second scenario about the reading program, I've just had that almost exact same thing happen in my school, where to cope with larger class sizes in grade 5, the kids were streamed into a range of reading levels in year 5, so that for literacy they were in much smaller groups than they would be if they were in their core class. And the success of the program that's been implemented is so good that exactly that happened. Not a beginning teacher, but a teacher only a few years into their career, brought that program to us, talked about the statistical response, and we're now planning to roll that whole program out next year right through the lower primary school. The leader has to be the champion of the educational processes in the school, the champion of the learning in the school. And what experience tells me, particularly at the principal's level, the principal can become the manager, the business-oriented mind around the school, and learning can actually sometimes take second place to that. And that's what I hear happening in that. You know, the question of where are the goalposts for that principal? Do people really come first with the principal? Should the principal have been promoted in that position in the first place? Is the principal or the leader a safe person to speak with? And where is the championing of the learning in the school? The capacity to allow somebody to risk take to see great gain with kids. That's how I respond to that, Jill. There you go.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Tony to comment in a minute, but I'm glad you spoke for the principal, because I'm imagining that the school leader may have missed, you know, the email or the phone call and wasn't aware, and yeah, the beginning teacher hasn't gone and followed up. They've just gone, oh, maybe this is personal, maybe I shouldn't speak to the leader. So there's uncertainty about, you know, do I look weak if I can't deal with this? So a lot of that uncertainty has to be resolved by, I think you're right, the culture of the school. And also, yeah. I think the school leader would have been happy. Yes, this first year teacher's doing great things. I'm getting, you know, good reports from parents, kids' data's doing well. That's wonderful. Without, sometimes beginning teachers aren't always, they're recognised as newbies, and maybe, look, you know, give them a few years and then they'll be able to lead, and then they'll be able to take this further. So I can understand the leader's perspective. I guess what we're doing and what you've both done really nicely is help problematise what's going on here and could it be done differently, because I think the school leader is the one who has got a lot of power in this situation, whereas the beginning teacher often doesn't. So can I ask you to finish off with any good advice for future leaders as they are working with new teachers? Tony, you first.
I guess probably the first thing I'd say is just to pick up on one of the points that Craig was making there about the culture and the organisational culture of the school is paramount to how first year teachers are valued or otherwise. And it's really important, I think, and my personal philosophy is that we really need to take on board what Sengi is talking about when he's talking about learning organisations versus organisations for learning. And a school has a real responsibility to be a true learning organisation where all components of the school are learning at all times. And we really have to support first year teachers and beginning teachers and all teachers to have the agency to come up with those ideas and to develop and implement them. Because if we don't invest in those ideas and those young teachers coming in, then the whole system and the whole school falls apart, because we can't keep doing what we've always done. And often it's easy as principal or easy as deputy to fall into the trap of, I know this works, I've been up that dry gully 5 years ago, it didn't lead anywhere. But you forget that technology changes and the system changes, and that while the gully may have been dry 5 years ago, it's now a torrent river. And you need to be conscious of the changing support. So for me, my advice to leaders with working with first years is to hold that leadership and that learning organisation culture near and dear, and to be constantly conscious of what's going on with your people, to be conscious of the feedback loops, to be making a real effort to know the individual
Yeah.
and to have that individual connection so that they feel comfortable talking to you, and you don't get stuck behind heads of departments or middle managers who might not be telling you everything you need to know.
Thank you for mentioning feedback loops. I love it. Craig, I'm going to switch over to you for a last word.
Just probably a couple of very simple tools that have helped me immensely. I think one of the ways to potentially avoid these situations happening is to become proficient in the art of reflective listening. We think we're good listeners, but as leaders, I know, as a school principal, I operate time poor almost 100% of the time. I have to practice being present for the issue that the person is bringing to me at the time they're bringing it to me. We tend to live in the future or in the past. And as a principal, my brain, my mind, is often thinking about something future when somebody is talking to me about something now. So when I practice reflective listening and I rephrase and paraphrase back and check understanding, that forces me to be in the now, because I can't do it if I'm not in the now.
Yep.
And the huge plus of that comes out of the fact that the person feels listened to, they have an opportunity to correct, they feel cared for and empathized with by the simple fact that you've taken the time to do that. And particularly in that first scenario with the male parent, my guess is the principal went, she handled that fine, that's fine, no need to follow up. But a reflective listening approach probably would have picked up on the concern the teacher had, the lack of safety and exposure that the teacher felt, and would have given the principal, even just simply in repeating something that says, you sound like you feel a bit, the teacher would have felt, listened to and heard. And the second one is even simpler than that. Take notes with every single meeting you have with anybody, whether you do it during the meeting or you do it after the meeting. Take notes. Learn how to do little dot points in a diary, because if you say you're going to do something, you need to darn well do it. You need to have the integrity. And the reality is, school leaders deal with myriads and myriads of decisions in a day, hundreds and hundreds of them. I get home, Candace says tea or coffee, and I don't want to make that decision. I'm flat out decision made out. Forget it. You decide, and I'll drink what you put in front of me. So we have these little conversations, often in the corridor, often not formally made, like the literacy thing that in the second scenario. But if I make a note and then I use a diary system which points forward a commitment to go back and have a second conversation, I will not forget. Because 9 times out of 10, when people here think that I've not listened to them or I've not responded to something, it's because I forget. It's because I don't take the time to make a simple diary note. So I guess that's a much more base answer than Tony's answer. I agree with everything he said, but they're two just very simple little things that have been of enormous benefit to me.
So one of the new words that I've learned from a reading I've done recently was phronesis, and that idea of practical wisdom. So I think what I've heard from you both and also from Jeanine is the practical insights and the thinking aloud that's going to really help other people as they're thinking about those processes. So those 2 tips, very powerful. Thank you very much, Craig. And Tony, the voice of experience of helping people in small communities, I think has been really valuable. So thank you very much. And if you've been listening to the recording, maybe you've got some ideas and you'd like to add them underneath the YouTube recording so that you can share your practical tips or the deep values that would drive you. Hopefully you will, I'm sure you've both got, and if you're listening to the recording, many more young colleagues or beginning teachers will be saying thank you years later because you were an inclusive leader. So thanks for joining us, and we'll finish up there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.